Hello and welcome to your psychology taster session. My name's Mrs. Smith and I teach psychology here at Trinity Sixth Form. We're really sad that we can't have our usual open evenings and get to meet you all and chat about psychology, so we thought we'd take this opportunity to do a short taster session to discuss about what psychology is, what you might study here in psychology, what you could potentially do after if you've got a psychology A level, and things that you could be doing between now and summer if you think that you might fancy doing psychology at A level here with us at Trinity. So what does our department look like? We have 5 different psychology teachers currently. They've got a range of different undergraduate degrees from a range of universities across the UK, along with masters and different specialisms ranging from clinical psychology through to forensic psychology. So what is psychology? Well, it is the study of people, and sometimes we use animals in order to study behaviour and look at human minds, why people think what they do, why do people behave in the way that they do. It's a scientific and rigorous subject. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. It is a science. If you study a BSc at university in psychology, it's a Bachelor of Science. And with that, it's not an easy subject. We are looking at human behaviour, we're looking at the biology of human beings. And in terms of the assessment, it's assessed in a range of ways, including longer answer essays. So it's important that you feel confident in putting essays together. There's a broad range of subjects. We look at many different areas, which I will talk about shortly, so there'll definitely be something of interest to you. It's always changing. That's really important to understand that it is an evolving subject. There is research being done every single day into why humans behave the way they do. And so the world of psychology is always changing and adapting, but it is fascinating. I'm obviously going to say that as a psychology teacher, but it is very fascinating, and it's a worthwhile subject in that it's applicable to whatever you want to go on and do, and we'll discuss that later when we start to look at careers that you could perhaps go on to do. What can't I promise then? Big misconception is that if you get a psychology A level or degree, you become a psychic. They're two very different things. You're not going to be able to leave Trinity being able to read people's minds, and you're not going to be able to kind of analyse people. That's the first thing that people say to me when they ask me what I do and I'm a psychology teacher. They say, oh, I better be careful what I'm doing. You'll be analysing me and reading my mind. That's not the case, okay? That's not what psychology is. So how could you use psychology after, if you're thinking further down the line and what you might want to do after your A levels, and because obviously that's important when you're picking the different A levels that you're going to do. Psychology is a great all-rounder. You can obviously go directly into the field of psychology with it, but there's lots of other areas that it's applicable to. So basically anything that you want to do, psychology is a good choice. You can see here on the British Psychological Society website, known as the BPS, the different areas of psychology. I'd really advise you to go and have a look on this website, and you can click on these different colour buttons and it shows you the different roles that you can do within it. So there's health psychology, clinical psychology, educational psychology, schools employ educational psychologists. You may just want to be an academic, you may want to stay at university and do research. Occupational psychologists will go into big organisations and help them to understand the staff that work there and how they can be utilised, how you can make the most of their strengths and their weaknesses through psychometric testing. Counselling, which is what most people will know psychology for. Neuropsychology, looking at the impact of the brain and whether specific areas of the brain might lead to specific behaviours. So we look throughout the A-level course alone at obsessive compulsive disorder and how that might be linked to areas of the brain. Schizophrenia, we talk a little bit about depression. Sports and exercise, so quite a lot of high-level sports team will have sports psychologists that will help them to understand how they can make their players play the best. And forensic psychology, a growing field that lots of students are interested in, looking at whether we can profile offenders, can we look at crime scenes to help us differentiate who might have possibly committed that crime. Really interesting area of work. Okay, so what does psychology look like at A level? These are the topics that you will cover. So you can see they're a real broad range. Memory, social influence, why do people follow orders, why do they obey? Attachment, looking at attachment figures between parents and what might happen if you don't have those attachment figures. Psychopathology is one that lots of students are interested in, that's your mental illnesses. So we look at obsessive compulsive disorder, we look at phobias, and we look at depression and how they might come about, why do people have them. Approaches, a really interesting one because that's an opportunity to look at the different fields of psychology. So there is disagreement between psychologists in terms of what causes particular behaviours, and it's a nice opportunity to look at how those psychologists differ in their ways of explaining behaviour. Biopsychology is looking at the brain structure, neurons, and the impact that our biological makeup has on our human behaviour. Research methods, really important. Everything that we study is underpinned by research methods. We've got to do research in order to be able to understand psychology, so it's really important for us to understand that. Issues and debates, there's lots of debates in psychology. Relationships, so we look at, why do we pick the partners that we do pick. Schizophrenia, what causes it? What is the classification and diagnosis? So what symptoms do you need to show in order to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, and how can we treat that? And then forensic psychology, as I mentioned earlier, looking at whether we can profile offenders and things like that. It's 3 exams, it's 2 hours long, and as I mentioned again earlier, it's multiple choice, some short answer questions and some longer answer questions of 16 marks. So there's a mix of those. Okay, I thought I'd hand it over to you and we could do a little experiment. So you're going to have 30 seconds to remember as many of the words that I'm about to flash up as possible. So you just need to be looking at the screen. You might want to grab yourself a pen and paper for afterwards, or a phone that you can jot them down. But for now you don't need anything. You just need to have a look at the screen and take note of the words, okay? So I'll set a timer for 30 seconds. Here we go. Okay, now you've got a minute. You might not need a full minute, but grab some pen and paper or your thing and write those words down, as many as you can. Okay, now I want you to check your list. How many of you wrote down the word sweet? If you didn't, great, it wasn't there. But actually, I bet lots of you doing this task did. Here's the words that were there. If you did write the word sweet, this was a false memory. One thing that you'll learn during psychology, during the memory module, is that the human memory is fragile and it's very easily altered. And one of the reasons why we look at this topic is because it has real-world application. In the criminal justice system, we often rely on eyewitness testimonies, and those eyewitness testimonies rely on participants' memories. And as we've just discovered, memories sometimes come back incorrectly. We retrieve our memories incorrectly. A really high profile case, it was actually in America, but there are lots of cases in the UK and worldwide, was that of Ronald Cotton. And Ronald Cotton spent many years of his life imprisoned for raping this lady here, Jennifer Thompson. But in actual fact, he didn't. It was wrongful conviction and he was actually released. There's 2 really good pieces of work that you can look at. There's a book written by Ronald Cotton where he talks about what happened, and he talks about the fact that he has actually forgiven Jennifer Thompson and they have actually now gained quite a good relationship because of what they've both been through. There's also a really nice documentary that's easy to watch. If you type it into Google, it's called Jennifer Thompson, Ronald Cotton 60 Minutes. and it interviews both of them. But it's a really good example of why we've got to be really careful as psychologists when we're using eyewitness testimonies and we're gaining information from people that might have witnessed crime, because actually the way that they're asked and the way that we word questions could influence how accurate that recall is. So, what can we do to ensure that investigations don't go wrong? As psychologists, how can we help the criminal justice system? We need to consider the way that we gather information from eyewitnesses. And we can do this in a few ways that we're going to discuss now. And this is on the specification. So if you're interested in this, this is something that we will learn when you do A-level psychology. Cognitive interview is something that's used across the UK by different police forces, and it involves getting your witnesses and interviewing them in a particular way to try and get the best possible eyewitness account that you can from them. And you do this by using 4 techniques. The first is getting the witness to reinstate the context. So we ask them about the scene of the crime. What was the weather like? What were they thinking? What were they feeling? The second bit is get them to report everything, every single detail, even if they think that it's irrelevant or trivial. The fact that they might have walked past a cigarette packet on the floor, anything. We also get them to recall from a changed perspective. So we ask them to describe the event as it would have been seen from different viewpoints. So if there'd been somebody stood at a bus stop across the road, what might they have seen? How might they have seen the event? And the final one is reverse the order. So we might ask them to describe the event in reverse order rather than starting from the beginning, start from the end of day and work backwards. Why do we do this? Well, context reinstatement allows us to recall how we felt, and it gives us cues that might help to enhance our recall. If we can remember how we were feeling that day and we can get back into that context, it might help for us to recall the event more accurately. Report everything. Why do we do it? Because witnesses might not realise that some details are really important, and details that might help recall significant information. It might act as a trigger to remember something else. Why do we get them to change the perspective? Well, it promotes a more holistic view and hopefully will enhance the recall. And why change the order? When events are recalled in a forward order, witnesses reconstruct it based on something called schemas, which are kind of packages of information that how we interpret and understand the world. For example, we could have a schema for a birthday party. Our schema for a birthday party would include things like birthday cake, balloons, friends, etc. And if we do it backwards, if we do it in a different order, then we would hope that it would be more accurate and not changed by the things that we would expect to see in that situation. What else is important? Avoid leading questions. Some of you might have come across leading questions before when you've studied English, and there's some examples here so we can see how these questions differ. The first two say, did you see a broken headlight or did you see a gun? The second one say, did you see the broken headlight? Did you see the gun? You can see how the second ones would lead the participant to believe that there was a gun. I'm just asking you whether you saw it or not. Whereas the first ones don't lead it. It's, did you see a gun? We're saying to the participant, we don't know whether there was one. Did you see one? So we've got to be careful in the way that we ask questions. There's been lots of research. Loftus is a key figure in this, a female psychologist. If you want to go away and Google her, Loftus, you'll see lots of research into leading questions. She also has done a really nice TED talk. If you download the TED app, there's lots of videos on there that you can watch that are related to psychology. So I'd advise doing that. Lots of podcasts, and they're all very short. They're all around 10 minutes. They're really easy to listen to. I'm going to set you with a task to go away and have a go at. Now you know and understand the importance of how we interview our witnesses. This was quite a high profile case in America. Michael Dunn was sentenced to life without parole for killing a Florida teenager in America. There is on the internet footage of one of the witnesses being interviewed. It's Jordan Davis being interviewed. So if you type that in, I've put the picture there on the screen. If you just type in that detail at the bottom of the YouTube clip, you'll be able to bring up that interview. And I want you to go away and kind of use what you've learned today in this session. What are your thoughts on the interview? Is it a good interview? Is it something that we'd see in the UK? Did the investigator use any of the cognitive interview strategies to make sure that they're getting an accurate account? Were there any leading questions used that could have perhaps influenced the way that the witness recalled? Because I don't know lots about this case, but what I do know is that Michael Dunn is sentenced to life without parole. He's never ever getting out of prison. Now, you can research more in terms of whether you agree with that or not, but what we do need to know is that if we are convicting people on eyewitness accounts, we need to know that those eyewitness accounts are accurate, because this is changing people's life. This is taking away people's liberty and freedom based on eyewitness accounts. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Please go away and have a think about psychology. Reach out to us at Trinity Sixth Form if you need to speak to any of the psychology teachers. Some of the things that I'd recommend going away and watching, there's lots and lots of things out there, but 24 Hours in Police Custody, Mindhunter is a really good one for forensics. It looks at profiling. The Unabomber, Stanford Prison Experiment, that's something that we learn when we do social influence. There's podcasts on that. There's a film on that that's loosely based on the experiment. Body clock, what makes us tick? We look at that in terms of biopsychology and our circadian rhythms. Why do we sleep at night? Why are we awake during the day? Why might you have difficulty sleeping at night? That's a nice program that helps explain. The Brain, A Secret History, looks at lots of the kind of more extreme, controversial psychological experiments that have happened over time, which is an interesting watch. The Human Mind, again, was a BBC program. You should be able to type these into Google and find them, and there's lots of things on Netflix that you can watch. I hope you enjoyed that session. Please get in touch if you've got any more questions, and we hope to see you studying psychology in September.